Hey everyone, welcome to Jen's Movies of the Week, episode 4. I'm excited to be here today, not only because we're at 4 episodes now, but because I have two really cool topics to talk about with you today. So, one of the topics is I want to tell you about my top 5 first time watches of July. So, I'm going to do that first, but I want to tell you also about the second topic I'm going to talk about today, which is I did a kind of mini shark week where I watched a couple of shark movies. And you may be familiar with some of them, and maybe you just want to share your opinion on those, or they might be new to you. So, either way, I hope you'll stick around for that. But first, yeah, I want to tell you about my top 5 first time watches of July. And this is something I've been keeping track of for a couple of years now. So maybe like 2 years ago, I started keeping track of everything I watched on Letterboxd. You might do that on a Google Doc, you might do that on a spreadsheet, or you might have a Letterboxd. And it's a nice way to kind of like keep track of what you've watched if you're like a movie lover, if you just want to have it for your own records and memories, or especially if you're someone like me who has a podcast. So I run Every Rom-Com, that podcast. It's a great way to keep track of what you've seen, things that you might cover in the future, etc. And I've also found that keeping a top first time watches list is a really good motivator for you to watch new movies instead of just rewatching the same stuff you always tend to watch, and also to seek out high quality movies because let's face it, sometimes we all kind of get in a mood where we just want to watch kind of easy movies, kind of fun movies, whatever's new on streaming. But having a top 5 first time watches list is a really good way to like motivate yourself to like see some of the classics, some things that might appear to be a little heavier, maybe a little outside of your comfort zone. And so it's really helped me with that. So starting in like 2025, I started keeping track of all my top 5 first time watches of every month on a Letterboxd list. And I will put a link to that one in the description box, as well as the one I've started for 2026, which is now up to 35 movies with these July ones added in. And it's a wide variety of movies, and it's really nice to be able to look back on it. At the end of 2025, I actually picked like what was out of all of those movies, the one that kind of stuck with me is kind of like my movie of the year, I guess you could say. And it ended up being the Japanese horror film Pulse, directed by Kiyoshi Kurosawa from 2001. And that one, I think it just really captured the mood of the year for me. It's a really cool movie, really, it's sort of it's sort of about technological and supernatural fears kind of blended into one. And you would think it would seem kind of dated because it's talking about like technology that was available just at the beginning of the internet age, but it feels like even more relevant now, like the ways that the characters interact with the computers and are affected by them in the movie. So really check that one out if you get a chance. Maybe I'll do a longer review on it sometime when I inevitably do a rewatch of it someday. Anyway, I've been keeping these lists on Letterboxd. I also like to talk about my top 5 first time watches on a Facebook group, which is called the Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces Facebook group over on Facebook, obviously. It's affiliated with the Piecing It Together podcast, run by David Rosen, which is a really good podcast, which I recommend that you check out, especially if you like keeping up with newer movies. Like, it does have spoilers, so you want to watch the movie first before you listen to the podcast, but it just kind of talks about like some of the possible influences on newer movies that came out, has guests. He also does live shows, particularly if you live in Las Vegas, you can attend the live shows and do audience participation. So check out Piecing It Together. And if you want a kind of chill group of people to talk about movies with and you're on Facebook, the Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces Facebook group is a really good place to do that too. So shout out to David there. He's created a really great podcast and a really great community. All right, so back to the top 5 first time watches though. I like to share those over on that community, and now I'm going to share them with you as well. So it's going to be a new outlet for that. And I'm going to have to say that actually this month, I've already talked about everything that's on the top 5 list on this show. So I'm just going to kind of go through them really fast. And if you want to hear a little more detail on any one of them, I'll tell you which episode I talk about it more in depth. Maybe next month, there will be some that I don't end up talking about first. We'll see. Anyway, so without further ado, here's my top 5 first time watches for July of 2026. At number 5, I have Murphy's Romance, which is an 80s rom com with James Garner and Sally Field. And it was a delight to find a new 80s rom com that I hadn't seen yet, because I've seen a lot of 80s rom coms. I talk about that one in more depth on episode 3. So check out episode 3 if you want to hear more. All right, and number 4, the China Syndrome, which really took me by surprise because I thought it might be kind of a relic of the 1970s, but in fact, it is really great, really tense conspiracy journalism movie from the 70s. You know, the 70s did great conspiracy films. So if you're interested in that kind of like corporate malfeasance, tense drama situation, check out the China Syndrome. And I talk about that more on episode, let's see, I think it says 2 here. Let's hope I'm right. All right. So at number 3, Copa 71, which is a really cool documentary about a Women's World Cup that was unofficial, that was held decades before FIFA started holding an official Women's World Cup. And you know that FIFA wasn't happy about it either because FIFA. Anyway, though, it's a really cool documentary if you're interested in feminism, women's history, sports history, soccer. Definitely check out that documentary, and I tell a little bit more about it on episode 1 of this podcast. At number 2, Witness for the Prosecution, directed by the great Billy Wilder. And I think after this month, I've pretty much wrapped up watching all of Billy Wilder's most well regarded films. I've got a couple Billy Wilder films coming in from the library on my hold list that are a little bit less well regarded. We'll see how I feel about those. But Witness for the Prosecution is rightly up there with one of his best pictures that he's made, and really recommend it. I loved Marlene Dietrich in it. I've been watching a lot of her films. She's one of my most watched actors of this year so far. And yeah, I like her more and more the more I watch her. I talk a little bit more about Witness for the Prosecution on episode 2. And then at number 1, now this is interesting. A lot of times, the movie that I end up liking the best at the end of the month, I actually rated lower initially than some of the others on the list. And that's the case this month. So, whereas I rated some of these other movies on the list 4.5 stars, I only rated my number 1 choice at 4 stars. But it was one of those movies that has not left my head. Like, I continue sort of remembering the imagery from it, the themes. I continue thinking about what it meant and just sort of being haunted by it. And at number 1, this movie is Stranger by the Lake. And it is a movie about gay men in a cruising spot who face danger and who, some of them, seem to invite the danger. It's a thriller. It's really sexually explicit, as I talk about on episode 2, where I talk about it more in depth. So it's not going to be something that everybody's going to want to watch. But if you can handle that kind of content or welcome it, as I do, I think you will really enjoy Stranger by the Lake. Very resonant. I plan on watching it again sometime this year, probably show it to my husband, because whenever I have movies that I really respond to strongly, I hope to watch them with my husband at some point. So that'll be one that we'll definitely be replaying. So yeah, that's my top 5 first time watches of July. Do you keep track of these? Would you like to share them in the comments? I would love to know what they are. And also a reminder, you can join that Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces Facebook group too. But yeah, I will respond to comments if you write them down there. All right, so top 5 first time watches out of the way. I'm now going to talk about my mini Shark Week. And I didn't even do this on purpose. I did not even realize it was like officially Shark Week last week, but I guess it was. But this might have actually, the algorithm might have brought the shark movies to me, because I was looking over at HBO Max, and they were showing me The Meg as one of the main things to watch. And over on Canopy, I ran into Sharknado. And so the movies I'm going to talk about are, first of all, Sharknado, and then The Meg 1 and The Meg 2. So without further ado, okay, so first of all, Sharknado. Watched it over on Canopy, where I usually watch sort of my hoity-toity fancy art films and such, but also Sharknado. I really wanted to like Sharknado. Okay, I'm going to start with that. I like B movies and I like aquatic horror usually as a genre. I did a podcast guest spot over with the Get Me Another podcast on Piranha from 1978. I ended up watching all the Piranha sequels as part of that too. So that's a really cool thing to listen to if you want. But I mean, that aside, I'm just saying I like this kind of movie, but Sharknado unfortunately didn't really do it for me. The first part of the movie kind of did though. So in the first part of the movie, it's more like there's like flooding and waves coming in from the sea as part of a big storm, and this is all happening in Los Angeles and so forth. And sharks are like flying into like bars and houses. They're coming out of the storm sewers. They're flooding the highways. That part of the movie I actually pretty much liked. I liked it because the effects, even though they weren't great, they still felt sort of plausible. And so it felt sort of more visceral, like the stakes felt like more. And then also, like, the cast at the beginning of the movie was more interesting, the characters, because it was more like these random people that were gathered at a bar, kind of working together as a quirky team. But then as you get into the second half of the movie, the main guy, he's like looking for his ex wife and his children. And like, I hate to say it, but the main guy was pretty boring. His ex wife, pretty boring, played by Tara Reid, who is like probably one of like their best known actor in the movie, and so they wanted to use her a lot, but unfortunately the character was like super dull. And then his children that he's looking for aren't even like young children or like young like teenagers. They're like 20-year-olds or something. And so when he goes to rescue them, and one of them's studying to be like a pilot, so you're like, these people really need imminent rescue, whatever. They just didn't add much in terms of stakes or like danger or interest. They ended up being kind of boring too, and they started just like dispatching the characters that were the most interesting. And then also that's where the NATO part comes in. It becomes, instead of like flooding and the sharks are still in the water, now the sharks are like literally flying around in the air. And you're like, come on, man. Like, I've already believed things that are impossible, but now you want me to believe that the sharks are like not in the water and they're still breathing. And also there's like tornadoes in Los Angeles. And okay, and this is a spoiler, so like skip if you don't want to hear the end. But like, and then their big plan is they're gonna fricking bomb the tornado like from a helicopter. So you're gonna fly a helicopter right by a tornado, and then you're gonna bomb it, and then it's gonna like kill the tornado. Like, I ended up, I don't know why I even bothered, but I actually did research, could you bomb a tornado and stop it? And like the answer is like sort of, but not really, because A, you wouldn't really be able to get close enough to do it. And B, like you might temporarily stop it, but then like the storm system as a whole would keep going, and you probably just get another tornado. Anyway, this is their big plan. Of course it works because it's this B movie, whatever. And it's ridiculous. And one really ridiculous thing happens at the end, which almost makes up for how like ridiculous the rest of it is, but I'm not going to get into that. Um, yeah, all I could think when I was watching the bombing the tornado part was that one time that Donald Trump was like, "We're gonna bomb the hurricane," and I'm like, did this man like literally watch Sharknado and get his like science ideas from that movie? It's possible. Anyway, Sharknado. I wasn't a big fan, but you know, if you do like it, I'm going to shout out Get Me Another Podcast one more time, because they did have an interview with the director on their show. So if you're a big fan, go ahead and listen to that. Um, yeah, but it wasn't for me. I'm sorry. All right, now, The Meg. Okay, so I remember when this came out in theaters and thinking it looked so stupid and like purposely not seeing it. Obviously my attitude towards movies that look stupid has changed in the ensuing years. I ended up liking The Meg, not a lot. I only rated it 3 on Letterboxd, but I had a fun time while I was watching it. It was silly. I was laughing. I was somewhat gripped by parts of it. The visual effects, it's just like when there's too much CGI or like whatever people are using and it's obvious, I get taken out of the movie to a certain extent. So I'm not going to be as engrossed as I would be if you're doing practical effects or if you have just the best visual effects ever, right? So it did start at a disadvantage because of that. But Jason Statham has this weird charisma. I have never seen him in movies before. I knew that my little brother liked Jason Statham, and I often agree with him. So I'm like, okay, well, my brother likes him. He might be okay. And my brother's right. This guy has like a weird charisma. I'm digging whatever he's bringing to the table. Um, he's a really good anchor for a ridiculous action movie. And that's essentially what this is. It's a shark movie, but it's also an action movie. It's also a disaster movie. It has elements of two of my favorite shark movies. So it has like sort of a Jaws 3 element in that it's taking place at this like underwater facility, and there's also a resort at one point. And then it's got deep blue sea elements of like scientists maybe exploring things that they shouldn't be exploring and being sort of punished for that. And yeah, I appreciated all of that. And I also appreciated that there's a lot of women in the cast and they are casting competent roles. So that's always something that appeals to me. But yeah, The Meg, if you just want a silly, fun shark movie, I think you could do a lot worse. I enjoyed it. So generally, thumbs up. The Meg 2, on the other hand, So the aforementioned David Rosen of the Piecing It Together podcast prefers Meg 2, or at least he did at the time when he was reviewing it. He did a whole episode on that, on Piecing It Together, which I totally recommend because his guest for that episode had seen the original Meg like, I think, over 300 times. Okay, so impressive, right? Anyway, that aside, my thoughts on the Meg 2, didn't like it as much, and a lot of that is to do with the first half of the movie where they're like deep, deep underwater in this trench. Oh, thing I forgot to say about the first one, you have to throw any logic or science completely out of your head, okay? Nothing that they talk about diving or submarines or how pressure from the ocean works is correct in either of these movies, but it gets even worse in Make 2, even more implausible. I don't know why in Sharknado it bothered me more than in these. Who knows? But you have to throw your brain away to watch these movies. Okay, in any case, though, the first half of Meg 2, it's like we're really, really deep in the water and it's like so murky and dark. And honestly, the visual effects in the first part of Meg 2 reminded me of Ant-Man 3. Okay, and we all know about Ant-Man 3's reputation. Yeah, and I wouldn't have kept watching it, honestly, except that I was like, well, maybe I'll talk about it on this show. So I'm glad I did finish it though, because the second half of the movie was more enjoyable once they got out into the light. We got a little more like shark fighting action going on. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, if you like this, they brought in more prehistoric fish like giant sharks and giant octopi and like weird like lizard creatures. So this movie is like sort of half Jurassic Park. Um, it gets a little intense. But I also like some of the callbacks they did in the second part of the movie to the first movie. They have a black character in the first movie who doesn't know how to swim. By the second movie, he knows how to swim. He knows how to fight. He's got this little emergency kit he carries around with him. I thought that was awesome. And they also bring back a little dog that was in the first movie, so that's also a treat. Gotta love it when they bring back a dog. Yeah, and there's one like really funny, like Sean Connery, James Bond worthy like pun that Jason Statham delivers at one point that I'm not even going to spoil because you should experience it fresh. All right, so yeah, that's what I have to say about the Meg 2. It's weird because I didn't like it while I was watching it, but now when I'm talking about it, I almost want to watch it again. So do I have Stockholm syndrome here? I don't know. Any case, if you saw Sharknado, the Meg 2, you want to tell your thoughts about it, leave it down there in the comments. I would love to hear it. And I will leave links to those other shows I talked about, communities I talked about, in case you want to check those out. As always, please like and subscribe our show. Like and subscribe to our show, and check out my podcast, Every Rom-Com, if you want to hear about movies in more depth with more research. We have great guests over there. And my voice is going, so I'm going to say goodbye. Bye.